Ronnie would replay this exact moment for the rest of his life. He was standing at 14,000 feet, wind tearing at his jacket, staring at a 7-inch monitor. His drone was 2 kilometers out. The battery was dying. He should have called it back 5 minutes ago, but he couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. Because there, on the screen, half buried in the snow of the Tibetan highlands, were 2 enormous glass domes. And inside one of them, something was growing. His Sherpa guide, Tenzin, leaned over his shoulder. The older man went completely pale. He whispered a single word. No. 3 days earlier. Ronnie Chen knew 2 reliable truths about himself. First, he was one of the best professional drone pilots in the world. Second, he was terrible at everything else. His marriage had slowly eroded away. His ex-wife once told him he treated his life like B-roll, always looking for the perfect angle, but never actually present in the moment. He wanted to argue, but he was literally editing footage while she was talking. Now, he shared custody of his 9-year-old daughter, Lily. He had $42,000 in credit card debt. He felt like he was failing at the one job that actually mattered, being a dad. So, when a production company offered him a 6-figure contract to film a solo wildlife documentary in the remote Tibetan highlands, he didn't hesitate. He needed the money. He needed to buy back his life. The job was supposed to be simple. Track snow leopards, get the shots, go home. Nothing about it would be simple. Hiring guides was harder than expected. The Chinese government had heavily restricted the border regions. The locals were terrified of outsiders with cameras. But eventually, Ronnie found Tenzin, a quiet, weathered man who carried the mountains in his bones, and his nephew, Dorji, a 30-year-old kid obsessed with YouTube and American slang. The climb took 3 agonizing days. Ronnie's 50-pound pack of drone gear made him regret every skipped gym session of the last decade. But sitting around the camp stove, looking up at a sky so dense with stars it looked fake, Ronnie finally felt a crack in his chest open up. He thought about Lily. He promised himself he'd take her camping when he got back. He'd been making empty promises like that for years. Tenzin stared into the fire and spoke quietly about how the mountains were changing. Glaciers retreating, streams drying up. The mountains remember what they were, Tenzin said, but they are becoming something else. On the 4th day, they reached the plateau. Ronnie launched his custom-modified $10,000 DJI drone into the freezing air. The footage he got was award-winning, crystal-clear 8K shots of frozen rivers and blue sheep defying gravity. But at 4,000 meters up, Ronnie saw something that shouldn't exist. Sunlight doesn't bounce off mountains like that. Snow scatters light. Rock absorbs it. This was a hard, perfect reflection, like glass. He flew closer, fighting massive headwinds, and that's when he saw them. 2 massive artificial domes, camouflaged perfectly to look like glacial ice from a satellite. And inside, rows of living, green plants at 14,000 feet in the dead of winter. Tenzin looked at the monitor and whispered, "No." Ronnie barely managed to land the drone before the battery died. He showed Tenzin the footage. Tenzin's face was stone. He pointed to the peaks. "That is the forbidden zone," Tenzin said. "The government restricted access decades ago. They claimed it was a wildlife corridor. A herder wandered in years ago. He was relocated along with his entire family." No explanation. Ronnie looked at the mountain. He thought about his debt. He thought about the documentary, but mostly he thought about Lily and what kind of man he wanted to be. A man who hides or a man who looks the truth in the eye. "I'm going up there," Ronnie said. Dorji stayed behind to watch the camp. Ronnie and Tenzin left before dawn. The cold was vicious, -20 degrees. Mid-morning they found it. Up close, the dome was 60 meters across. Ronnie touched the glass, flinching. It wasn't freezing, it was warm. Through the glass, he could see irrigation lines, UV arrays, temperature sensors. "This isn't a greenhouse," Tenzin whispered. "This is a farm." They found a heavy metal hatch buried under a snowdrift. It was sealed with an electronic biometric lock. It looked dead, frozen solid. Ronnie dug into his pack. He pulled out a high-capacity lithium drone battery and a variable voltage regulator he used for field repairs. His fingers were so numb they were bleeding, but he managed to pry off the lock's access panel. He stripped the wires with his teeth. If he fried the circuit board, they were locked out forever. If he shorted the battery, his $10,000 rig was garbage. He touched the wires to the terminal. The screen flickered. A message in Mandarin appeared. Tenzin translated, System offline. Emergency power detected. Default access protocol engaged. The magnetic locks disengaged. Ronnie pulled the heavy hatch open. A rush of warm, stale air hit their faces. They climbed down into the dark. They stood on a metal walkway overlooking an underground chamber the size of a football field. Below them, bathed in the glow of full-spectrum UV lights, were thousands of crops. Wheat, rice, vegetables, all automated, all thriving without a single human inside. But the farm was just the beginning. They found a state-of-the-art medical bay, a communications hub, a military-grade geothermal power plant, and then they found the living quarters. There were over 100 rooms. The lower levels had military cots, but the upper levels, they were luxury suites, real hardwood, high thread count sheets. On the desk was a leather-bound welcome packet. Ronnie opened it. Welcome to Facility 7 Sigma. Every measure has been taken to ensure your safety and comfort. Duration of stay, up to 15 years. Ronnie's blood ran cold. He opened the desk drawer. Inside was a luggage tag, the kind you get flying first class. Written in blue ink was a name. Ronnie recognized it. You would recognize it. It belonged to one of the most famous tech billionaires on the planet. He checked the next room. A media mogul, the next room. A retired head of state, a pharmaceutical CEO. This wasn't a military base. It was a lifeboat. Built inside a mountain, invisible to satellites, stocked for 15 years. Reserved for the billionaires and politicians who could buy their way off a dying planet. The rest of the world, the 8 billion of us on the surface, were not part of the plan. Tenzin stood in the luxury suite. His voice trembled with a grief so deep it was almost geological. My ancestors protected these mountains for 7 generations, he whispered, and they hollowed them out so they could survive the end of the world while we freeze outside. They had been inside for 4 hours. Then Tenzin grabbed Ronnie's arm. He pointed at the floor. Fresh boot prints. Someone had walked through here in the last 24 hours, and they were not alone. They moved fast. No running. Running makes noise. Just silent, suffocating panic. Back through the suites. Back past the farm. As they passed the medical bay, Ronnie saw it. A security screen had flickered on, and in the corner, a red light. Blinking. They ran. Lungs burning, hearts hammering against their ribs. Ronnie practically threw himself up the metal ladder. The blinding white light of the freezing surface hit him. He hauled Tenzin up, ripped the battery from the lock, and slammed the heavy hatch shut. They didn't stop. They slid, tripped, and tumbled down the mountain for 30 minutes, tearing their hands on the ice, waiting for the sound of a gunshot or a helicopter. But nothing came. The mountain was dead silent. That night in the tent, Ronnie's hands wouldn't stop shaking. He backed up the photos to 3 separate hard drives. He had the story of the century. 1 email to the New York Times, and the world would know. The elites would scramble. But then what? People with infinite money and zero accountability don't just let you ruin their backup plan. They would destroy his life. They would take his daughter. Ronnie thought about Lily, 9 years old, completely unprotected in a world where the people in power had already decided she wasn't worth saving. At 2 a.m., he made his choice. He encrypted the files, mailed a flash drive to a fake P.O. box, and wiped his laptop clean. He wasn't ready to release it, but he wasn't going to let it die. 2 months later, Ronnie finally kept his promise. He took Lily camping in the Colorado woods. Lying in her sleeping bag, looking up at the stars, she asked him an innocent question. "Dad, do you think there are big secrets out there? Things nobody knows about?" Ronnie stroked her hair. "Yeah, Bug," he whispered. "I think there are." A week later, Ronnie noticed a black sedan parked across the street from his apartment. It sat there for 3 days. On the 4th day, it was gone. But tucked under the windshield wiper of Ronnie's car was a small, heavy envelope. No logo, no return address. Just 6 words typed in black ink. "We know what you have. If you're watching this, it means something happened to me, and it means the files just went public. Look to the mountains.